Okay, I want to talk about the Lynx Power In and my choice when it comes to equipment, batteries in particular, and why a bus bar is required would be the smartest thing to do. There are several reasons. Now, with my setup here, the plan is to have 4 batteries in parallel with 4 Some Fun Kit 300 HP. Right now I just have one SOK 206 and one Some Fun Kit 300 HP. I mentioned this in the previous video. I use an exact same length of wire to both batteries. In fact, to all 4 batteries, they'll be exactly the same. In this particular case, I find that I only need 5 feet for each line. When calculating resistance or what size cable, you have to keep in mind that 5 feet of one cable, you need to calculate for 10 feet to get the right amperage that you will need. My Victron Multiplus will, basically the maximum it will draw is about 200 amps. So definitely don't need a fuse bigger than 200 amps for each line. That would change depending on what your capacity is of your inverter. But in this case, it's 3,000 watts or actually 3,000 VA, which is about 2,600 watts. Okay. The reason why I'm using a bus bar and the exact same cabling is so that the charging and discharge rate would be the same on all batteries. One feature that would even improve this, of course, is having your link shunt Serpo GX that I'm using here communicating with each battery. The Sun Fun Kit has that option, and there's a third party which I'm going to check out later on and might try installing it. It's still beta. Will allow me to connect my Sun Fun Kit battery to my Serpo BX via Bluetooth to get all the parameters. So this way it knows the state of charge, things of that sort. And plus you can program it in that itself, the limit as to what you want to charge at amperage and what you don't want to charge. But until that happens, you need to do this. You need to have a bus bar equivalent of cabling. And also you need a proper gauge wire. Just because the SOK is 200 amps, I'll probably use number 2 wire. And while the Some Fun Kit barely makes it with number 2, I think, so that's why I went with 2 odd. The cabling in your battery, they're all resistive, so you need to keep them the same. So as a result, I use the same size cabling regardless if other batteries are a little bit lower than my highest one. So same gauge all the way through. Okay, that's going to pull this cover off. Of course, when you purchase this Lynx Power In 1000 amp, it does not come with the ability of having it fused. It's something I've added. You're only talking about $2 or $3 of either stainless steel, copper washers, lock nuts. And this is the way I mount it. So now I have each line fused for 200 amps. I happen to put 2 100 amps just for storage purposes right now. So it's pretty close. We're talking about a foot or so a bus bar. When I checked my state of charge, plus the charging and discharging rate as I was using the system while camping, I was quite surprised how close it stayed together, even though I had 3 different batteries. If one, this is after everything is fully charged, of course, and when one says 90%, the other one is basically saying 90%. And whether it be 80, it will say 80, give or take 1% or so. It varied. So that's what I want to see. It minimizes how often the BMS is stopping a flow or not stopping a flow, depending on whether you're discharging or charging. And when I was charging back up, as I approached the absorption voltage, they all went roughly within a matter of several seconds into absorption mode. Perfect. This is the way I want it. It worked great. And until I can communicate directly with these batteries, this is probably the best way. Now, I have another project. I am going to be looking at a server rack and also 48 volt inverter, probably a multi-plus or something equivalent to that. I don't think the multi-plus 1 or 2 comes in 48, I don't think. So I'll have to get a different brand. So this is what I feel is a must if I'm going to buy a server rack. First of all, it has to be a good quality server rack. Nothing too flimsy, good wheels, can handle the weight of 4 or 6 server racks. To be able to handle 48 volts DC. We're talking about 400 to 600 amps. It has to have a bus bar. I don't want cabling going from one battery to the next battery to the next battery. Even though the BMS talks to each other in this network, there can still be issues of balancing voltage, state of charge. So bus bar is a must. If the server rack doesn't have one and the battery that I'm looking at doesn't support it, it's off my list. It needs to come with a breaker for DC loads. You have to be sure. And a separate power switch. When connecting to your system or inverter, or if you have another bus bar outside the server rack, you do not want to use the same gauge that each server rack is connected to the bus bar. From what I see, most of the units are using a number 4, number 3 in that range to the bus bar, which is adequate. But I've seen people saying, oh, number 4, number 3, okay. They have 10 or 20 or 15 feet of number 3 wire or number 4 wire going to their inverter or their solar system. And on top of that, because the way they set up their equipment, one line is longer than the other. No. That's totally wrong. You have to consider the total capacity of your server rack. It's probably around 400 to 600 amps. You have to consider the capacity of your inverter. Just how many watts are you going to be providing at any given time? What's the amperage you're giving? I would say in most cases, people who are using server racks probably need a 4 odd gauge wire coming from the server rack to their system. And it should be the same length for the positive and for the negative. You gotta remember, this is like resistors. If you know how resistors work in a circuit, it can change. It can change your capacity, amperage, and heat, and things of that sort. Now, once your system's all set up, and allow things to balance out, and use it a little bit, you want to go and check your system. See what the state of charge is on each rack. It should be the same or very close. Same with the voltage. If it's not the same, try moving your negative to the opposite end of your bus bar. So your positive will be on the top of your server rack, and your negative will be at the bottom. I'll point out the reasons why. If that doesn't work, or it still needs improvement, check your cabling. Be sure you're using the same quality and size of cabling, and also your connectors. I've seen people use different size connectors, one big, one small. This all adds. So in the way you connect things, you need to check that to be sure. Double check that everything's tied down. If you see an improvement and it's still bad, then I would probably take the server racks and check to see if there's loose connections inside the server rack, usually, especially the one that probably has a way off readings compared to others. I would kind of check. Now, not all BMS are smart BMS. I noticed some use their own in-house, or some brand that's unknown. Who knows how long it's been out, how well it's been tested. Maybe there's firmware above it. So those are possibilities. That's something you would definitely look at if you're not getting that balancing state of charge the same, whether it be charging or discharging. It would be also good to look for a Bluetooth app so that you can remote viewing. You want to be able to check the state of charge, your DC voltage, your balancing voltage, your cell voltage. For safety, and not to scare the daily livings out of you, be sure to get a unit that has a pre-charge resistor. An adequate one too. If they don't, look for a brand. I think this is probably the minimum requirements when you're shopping for good quality server rack system. I haven't purchased any yet. I'm researching, and I'm kind of disappointed on many of them. Don't even meet half of the requirements. There's a couple that have come close, and it's possible I could make a few adjustments that will meet my needs. But I have lots of time. I'm still trying to finish off my unit here, which is for my Cougar trailer. I don't need 48 volts. I just need enough battery capacity that I can run for a long period of time without having to depend on solar panels only, and minimize the use of a generator. This system over the summer proved to work really well. I'm very pleased with it. And I designed it, like this is about a 15-inch by 48-inch frame support, self-supporting. I slide it underneath and I can slide it out. The only thing I need to disconnect is the batteries and hook them up. There's enough room behind it to fit all four of SOKs, 300 HP. I'll have a capacity of 1200, and that's more than enough. And what's nice about this approach, if down the road I end up getting a bigger trailer, or who knows, maybe I want to retire in a trailer, I don't know. I could take those 4 and convert them to 48, and the only thing I would have to replace is my multiplus to a 48 system. There you go. And probably reduce the size of the fuses. So anyways, that's an option if I ever find that's what I need. But I don't see that happening for a while, and this is going to work great. Okay, I'm going to add a few more information to this video towards the end. The list of options, my bus bar options, I'm going to have it towards the end of the video, probably 40 seconds running or something of that sort. So if you want to look at it, read it, it'll be there. Okay, I'm going to put this back together. Just a Phillips screwdriver. Don't care to use a power tools on stuff like that. And here's a chance to prove a point which I showed on a previous video. I'm going to power up my SOK 206. Powered up, shut down. I'm assuming there isn't a pre-charge pack, or if there is one, the BMS shuts off before. Maybe the current draw is still too much for it. This BMS, I replaced it already to a V3 version, so thank goodness I don't have these batteries and I had to depend on that to fire up my system. Okay, let me turn this off. And this is my Sunfun kit, 300 HP. And which hopefully very soon they will be talking to my Servo GX directly. So it will be a perfect system for keeping every battery perfectly balanced. There you go, it stays on. Not a problem. Now I can put the Sunfun kit on. Okay, and then I'll turn off my, did I say Sunfun kit? Now turn on my SOK. I sometimes get SOK and SFK mixed up, so keep that in mind if there's seemingly a contradiction. Okay, so that's on, and I'm gonna turn off my Sunfun kit. So it works. I'm sure it has something to do with the BMS and the pre-charge capacitors, just inadequate for only a few things here. A Lynx shunt, a Lynx distributor, there's nothing that links power in. The smart solar is not doing anything, so Servo GX. There would be something going into the multiplus, I imagine, because I believe there is a capacitor. Obviously, it's a surge sufficient enough to shut down the BMS on the SOK, while the Sunfun kit handles it well. Okay, I'll add the rest of the information. Okay, parallel battery bank wiring. The first icon on the far left is not the way you want to make the connection. What happens is that the battery will get charged with a higher current than the top battery, and the top battery gets charged with lower voltage than the bottom battery. So one battery is always working harder, discharging harder, or charging harder. This could result in a premature failure. You have to keep in mind that your cabling, your lugs and battery connections, they're like resistors. They add to it. So that's why it's important to do these things correctly, hook up the batteries correctly. And there you go. We'll show you next one. Okay. The correct way of connecting batteries parallel. You want to ensure that the total path of the current in and out of the battery is equal. And the diagram shows 4 ways, including far right where there's a bus bar involved. Notice how I mentioned opposite ends might be required for some of the server racks. So I think this is a good illustration. By the way, this information is available on the Victron site, so feel free. It's public. Okay, you see the Lynx power in. I believe they have 2 models where the connector is either 8 or 10 millimeters. I think the one I have is 8 millimeters. Again, it's available online. The information, if that's something of interest to you. And this is my basic setup. I have a Lynx distributor, a BMS, and the power in, all 1000 amp, and they all talk to each other. What's nice about the distributor, if your fuse goes, you'll get a red light showing up on that fuse, so you can visual check. Of course, I'm sure through an app you will notice something's going on. Okay, this is some quick notes I made about what my bus bar options are. I'll let it run for a while if you want to read it. You don't have to worry about it shutting off. There are a few other little things I'm still trying to decide on. Here in Canada, there's not much options. You have to bring it in, which means shipping is crazy. I think just to bring in 1 unit, 48, but $450 US shipping at 30%. And then, of course, duty. And then the shippers that do the paperwork across the border, they want to add another probably $60 or more. So one has to be careful. I did talk with one supplier about warranty. Well, who pays for the shipping to get this fixed? And they said, oh no, we'll provide a prepaid shipping label. That's good. I guess there's one caveat or something you have to be careful. You have to convince them that it needs to be shipped for servicing, for warranty. You have to convince them that it's a warranty issue, and somehow you're not at fault. So I have not yet found anyone locally selling these things, so we'll have to wait and see the way to go. I noticed some of the units are soldered, or welded, I should say, not soldered, which means if you're stuck and you can't get the warranty, like I my current SOK, because they don't think anything's wrong with it. What can I say? Well, at least I can take it apart. I can service it. I can replace the BMS on there with anything, any model. In fact, I could put an SOK in there, BMS, the one they sell. And I'm toying with that idea. I do, but we'll see. Yeah, so if it's welded, you're stuck when it comes to fixing yourself. I don't think I'm going to go to the trouble of breaking those welds or have to cut it and put some screws in there or bolts or something. Definitely will avoid your warranty for sure. So you have to decide if a welded unit or bolted unit, which is more important. Usually server racks, once you put it in, everything is tightened. It doesn't move. And it's always a good idea, at least once a year, to pull everything out, take a look, physically check everything, put it back. So I don't think it's too critical. I can imagine some people who do a lot of videos or whatever on these things, they're always taking it apart and experimenting because they got the equipment free, so they're not too worried about doing some sort of damage. But for the average person who invests a lot of money in it, they don't want to play with it. They want it working, be reliable, lock everything down. So that's something you have to decide. And it's nice to see they have expansion welding joints, which is good, strapped. Generally speaking, I think most of them are pretty well put together. It's just that some don't have the pre-charge resistor pack, others do, or if they do have one, it doesn't seem to work as well. They still draw over 100 amps or maybe even 200, but these are things you have to find out before you make a purchase. So good thing I got lots of time. I'll just keep my research there. Okay, I'll let it run there. And of course, towards the end, you will get my Simply Off-Grid Living. Feel free to subscribe, thumbs up, thumbs down, leave your comments.